So you can shop around and source out the foods that are without preservatives and where you kind of have a little bit of an idea of where it comes from.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're gonna have 2 more questions for Dr. Dom and someone who's not asked a question before to any specialist. So this is one.
Who's the other one?
You and Francisco fighting, Brett.
I'm going to choose my question. Okay, sure. You're out. You already asked a question.
There's a lot of noise going on.
Oh, come on. Who's going to put it on social
Hey,
media?
I'm David Georgia from Australia. Nice to meet you. Thanks, brother. First saw your work on the Swiss Synopsis last year. Got me very interested, very intrigued, dealing with the ketones. So a couple of questions that I had was, I deal with a lot of high-performance athletes. I'm a former athlete myself. And I've got a 2-part question. The first part being, caffeinated versus non-caffeinated. So what do you, with the research you've done mitigating the risk of seizures with the Navy SEAL divers, why the caffeine versus the non-caffeine? Nothing to do with the risking of seizures, but yes, just the product. So what does the caffeine do with the beta-hydroxybutyrate that combines that has an effect versus the non-caffeinated? Is there anything like a chemical reaction that happens that makes that more beneficial?
Yeah. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of caffeine. When we study ketones, I can't talk about it completely because I don't have clearance yet, but I'm working to do a project with NASA and a project with the Special Operations community, and I choose to use the Prove It product that does not have caffeine in it, so we can separate the effects of the ketones versus the effects of caffeine, right? Because caffeine can actually, it may not be published yet, but we know that simply by taking caffeine, especially if you're on a ketogenic diet, it can increase your ketone levels. So it mobilizes fatty acids for fuel. Those fats go to the liver, and the liver through beta oxidation can make the ketones. So I actually see ketones and caffeine as working very synergistically together, but as a scientist, I need to study the effects of an independent variable of ketones by themselves. But I think in the pipeline, the experiments that I want to do for performance and even maybe neurological disorders too, because I think the brain can actually be enhanced with caffeine, especially in the presence of ketones, which is another project. And hopefully other scientists listening to this don't jump on this and study it, because I want to study it. But I do think there's remarkable effects of ketones alone. Obviously, it's what I study, but I think there's some synergy there when you combine caffeine and ketones together. And I don't know if Dr. Cunane has talked yet, but he may have some data. I don't know if it's published yet, so I'm not going to say too much, but I know there's evidence out there that if you take caffeine and you're on a ketogenic diet or even with ketone supplementation, it may further augment and increase the level of ketones just through fat oxidation.
Absolutely. So with that then, dealing with high-performance athletes and being in that industry, if we're looking at their body composition, and obviously there's like an optimal body composition and then optimal performance, and you want to be able to juggle the both. You don't want them to be too lean, and you don't want them to underperform. So using carbohydrates and using something like a ketone max to enhance performance means that they're working off 2 fuel sources. Would you see this, just saying, dealing with your high-performance athletes, which would be the Navy SEALs, using this as a means to get them an increased performance? Is that?
Yeah, this is a good question. I get this a lot. So I think from my perspective, and I'm speculating just based on feedback because we haven't done a controlled study,
which is fine.
I think it's good to train your body to function off low carbs, right? Not necessarily a ketogenic diet, but maybe a modified Atkins or low carb paleo, whatever you want to call it, and then train your body to use fat and ketones for fuel. And then during game time or the actual kind of event, if it's prolonged especially, to maybe add small amounts of a slow burning carbohydrate to, in addition to ketones. So, but if you completely eliminate carbohydrates from your diet, which is kind of hard to do admittedly, right? So I think you may get into, the body will adapt to that, and the different transport mechanisms and maybe enzymes like pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, PDH, that's kind of like the gatekeeper to your carbohydrate metabolism. But if you just keep in 50 grams of carbs a day, that enzyme stays relatively active. So if you dump in 100 or 150 during an event, you're going to use those probably a little bit more efficiently. So, so my recommendation is to train low carb, and during game day or the time where you need peak performance, to throw in small amounts of carbohydrates during that time.
I've got a million more questions, but I'll leave you to it. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
One more.
Last one. Hey guys, I'm here in Tampa, Florida with Dr. Dominic D'Agostino.